Hey, it's Chris, the supply chain doctor and host of Supply Chain is Boring, bringing you practical insights to help you become a better supply chain professional and change the world one supply chain at a time. In this session, we introduce and discuss the general functions of inventory as defined by the APICS body of knowledge. As a reminder, APICS materials are the sole property of APICS. APICS materials are for the customer user's educational use only. And APICS materials may not be copied, reproduced, recorded, downloaded, distributed, or displayed electronically or otherwise for any purpose. One premise of anything APICS is understanding inventory. Any student of CPIM, CSCP, or CLTD should be familiar with inventory and inventory management concepts. The APICS dictionary defines inventory in terms of both types and functions. Those stocks are items used to support production, raw materials, and work in process, supporting activities, maintenance, repair, and operating supplies, and customer service, or finished goods and spare parts. Those are essentially the types that we covered in a prior session. Inventory functions are anticipation, hedge, cycle, or lot size, fluctuation, safety, buffer, or reserve, transportation, also known as pipeline, and service parts. In another session, we covered the 5 basic types of inventory: raw materials, work in process, finished goods, maintenance, repair, and operating supplies, and in transit or pipeline stocks. Along with the different types of inventory, there are different inventory functions, or what you might consider management tactics. The general inventory functions fit into 4 categories: serve and support demand, smooth the impact of supply and demand fluctuations, protect against uncertainty, and create cost-saving opportunities for the company. The inventory functions discussed in all 3 learning systems are in transit or pipeline stock, cycle stock, anticipation, safety stock, hedge, decoupling, and buffer. The astute observer might notice that inventory, pipeline inventory or in transit inventory was also talked about as a type of inventory in a prior session. But we'll walk through these functions of inventory next. Pipeline stocks, cycle stocks, and anticipation inventory help support demand. Pipeline stock is interesting. In CSCP, it is referenced as a type of inventory, and in CLTD and CPIM, it is considered a function. Regardless of this being a type or a function, it is good to understand pipeline stock. The pipeline stock function is getting product delivered from point A to point B. Think about this as the amount of inventory being moved. In CLTD terms, this could be aligned with the time and place utility of logistics. The APICS dictionary defines pipeline stock as inventory in the transportation network and the distribution system, including the flow through intermediate stocking points. And depending on what learning system you reference, pipeline stock may also be referred to as transportation, distribution, or in-transit inventory. Another note is pipeline stock generally refers to movement of inventory between facilities over longer distances and typically longer time frames. Something moving between 2 buildings on the same campus or between 2 operations in the same facility are not considered pipeline stock, but would probably be better classified as work in process, which is a type of inventory. Think of pipeline stock as material on a plane, train, or ship, destined for the customer, a distribution center, or a subsequent trading partner. The cycle stock function relates to the decision to manufacture a quantity of products, as in a lot or batch size. The driver is purchasing or producing in batches. The purpose is to reduce setup costs and avoid the loss of process capacity, specifically around manufacturing. The APICS dictionary defines cycle stock as stock depleting gradually as customer orders are received and is replenished cyclically when supplier orders are received. Cycle stock is closely associated to inventory days on hand and economies of scale. Many times, companies will find it more advantageous to purchase a week's worth of supply rather than purchasing daily usage quantities. As the inventory is used, it depletes down to a minimum and a reorder is triggered. This is typically seen in the traditional sawtooth usage chart. For example, if a company uses 100 units per day, they may decide to purchase 500 units once per week rather than 100 units daily. In everyday terms, you might think of cycle stock as a loaf of bread. When you go to the store, you typically buy a loaf of bread that is stored in your pantry and used over time rather than buying a couple pieces of bread each time you need to make a sandwich. As mentioned earlier, cycle stock often is associated to lot size stock, or the quantities ordered above actual immediate demand. Lot size drivers and calculations are outside the scope of this session, but could include things like transportation costs, production utilization metrics, EOQ, etc. When a company has a high degree of certainty a future event will happen, they may start building inventory in anticipation of the event, typically because they will not have the capacity to satisfy demand when the event occurs. The function of anticipation inventory is to support production and/or delivery constraints for product with high expected fluctuations. The driver is insufficient capacity to support spikes in demand. For example, building up stockpiles of barbecue grills in anticipation of the spring buying season would be an example. The APICS dictionary defines anticipation inventory as additional inventory above basic pipeline stock to cover projected trends of increasing sales, planned sales promotions, seasonal fluctuations, plant shutdowns, and vacations. As described in the definition, anticipation inventory is associated to seasonal inventories. For example, a manufacturer may start building up lawnmower inventories in the winter to support the expected high demand selling in the spring. This may help balance production utilization while satisfying customer demand. Other examples include back to school season for paper, pen, and backpack suppliers, Halloween and candy and costume companies, and Thanksgiving for ham and turkey food processors. Most of these types of companies do not have the capacity to satisfy the tremendous demand that occurs during their seasonal sales. Another practical example, I have a customer who would shut down a utility-intensive operation each summer to avoid summer season electric spikes and allow them to do preventive maintenance. To help manage during the shutdown, they would build inventory in anticipation of this event. Decoupling and buffer can be associated to protecting against supply and demand fluctuations. And to be unclear, the terms are very similar and depending on what you read, are used to define each other. The function of decoupling is to separate supply from demand to help optimize processes. The driver is protecting against demand uncertainty and minimize stockouts. Decoupling is a form of buffering as defined by the APICS dictionary. Creating independence between supply and use of material commonly uses buffer inventory between operations, so fluctuations in the production rate of the supply operation do not constrain use rates of the next operation. A good example of decoupling is a finished goods warehouse. The warehouse serves as a decoupling point between consumer demand and production capacity. The decoupling inventory in the warehouse will help keep customer service levels high and allow manufacturing to better utilize production assets. Typically, finished goods warehouses are going to be needed until we can manufacture efficiently in lot sizes of 1. You can also think of your refrigerator or food pantry as a decoupling point between what you use daily and what the grocery store has on their shelves. Closely associated to decoupling is buffer inventory. This is typically inventory at the local plant level used to keep specific operations working at capacity. In APICS terms, this buffer is more aligned with the theory of constraints and drum buffer rope concepts. The function of buffering is to protect supply chain nodes from variances in supply and demand. The driver is building up inventory to optimize or plan around an operational constraint. For example, to keep a machine running, the company may create a buffer of input inventory for that specific process. The APICS dictionary defines buffer as a quantity of inventory awaiting further processing. This may also sound like the WIP, the specific inventory type. Buffer can take the form of both physical inventory, typically WIP, and time, and is used extensively in the theory of constraints to help optimize system throughput. The way I associate decoupling and buffering is I tend to view decoupling as a process organizational structure at a macro level. For example, the company decides to have a large finished goods warehouse or implements a postponement strategy. And buffer inventory is a micro level practice done generally to support operational work centers. Back to what I mentioned earlier, some say decoupling and buffering are synonymous, and the true differences, if any, will depend on the authors of the body of knowledge. For example, buffer is not defined as an inventory function in CLTD, but is associated to decoupling. And to make things even more unclear, buffer is also referred to when people discuss our next topic, safety stock. The function of safety stock is to protect against unforeseeable fluctuations in demand or supply. The driver is acquiring planned inventory to reduce the potential for stockouts. The APICS dictionary defines safety stock as a quantity of stock planned to be in inventory to protect against fluctuations in demand or supply. Safety stock is a calculated quantity of inventory expected to be on hand at any time. CPIM gets into the details around calculating safety stock based on management expected customer service levels, while CSCP and CLTD provide general references to the term and uses. Safety stock is considered a just-in-case stock or inventory insurance to protect against delivery delays, product recalls, spikes in demand, forecast errors, etc. As mentioned earlier, some refer to safety stock as buffer stock. As a matter of fact, I had someone in a class challenge me the two terms were the same. Of course, it depends on what words you're using and who wrote the meanings. For example, in CSCP, I found safety stock is held as a buffer against miscalculations of timing and quantity. And CPIM1, I found safety stock is sometimes called inventory buffer because it is a buffer against uncertainty. So if this is not clear as mud, I don't know what is. But for your learning references, I would consider buffer inventory as a component of TOC or theory of constraints. Hedging is similar to anticipation inventory, but has more of a financial component and is typically less certain to occur. The function is to manage cost of future inventory and or create a competitive advantage. The driver is the advanced acquisition of inventory to support a company's business strategy. The APICS dictionary defines hedge inventory as a form of inventory buildup to protect against some event that may not happen. Hedging involves speculation, so the probability is less than what you might expect from anticipation inventory. A good example of hedging is seen in fuel markets. Companies may make advanced bulk purchases of fuel to mitigate expected short-term prices in future short-term spikes in future prices. In summary, pipeline stock is associated to moving product from point A to point B to support the logistics time and place utility. Cycle stock is a function of buying or producing in batches to optimize manufacturing or purchasing and references daily usage. So think about that as lot sizing. Anticipation inventory is a function of manufacturing and or delivery constraints driven by the planned inventory buildup based on a highly probable event, high certainty something will occur. Decoupling is a macro level concept that separates supply from demand to help optimize processes and protect against demand uncertainties. So we've got this one here. Buffering is closely associated, is more aligned with optimizing or planning around internal process constraints in the theory of constraints concept. So think about it as TOC. Safety stock is a calculated level of inventory to protect against unforeseeable fluctuations and reduce the potential for inventory stockouts that negatively affect customer service levels. And hedging is used mainly to help manage cost and or create a competitive advantage for the company. Hedge is based on a speculation something will happen. So it's more speculative as opposed to certain. Similar to the 5 inventory types outlined in another session, these 7 general inventory functions should be considered key terms for CPIM, CSCP, and CLTD. These practice questions are representative examples of what you might see on an exam if you plan to take the exam. No warranty or guarantee is implied. 310.14. Product inventory that is accumulated by the manufacturer in advance of the peak selling season is an example of fluctuation, anticipation, transportation, or hedge. Best answer, anticipation inventory. Fluctuation inventory is decoupling or buffering to protect against random demand variations. C, transportation inventory is an inventory type resulting from product moves. And D, hedge inventory is a protection against uncertainty, primarily for financial benefit. 36-10, a company may order in a blank quantity to take advantage of plant capacity utilization, improve transportation utilization, or take advantage of purchase quantity discounts. Best answer, lot size. Again, I caution the CSCP student to not be confused between cycle stock and lot size inventory, which is actually not defined in the APICS dictionary. They're referenced together in the book, but technically have two distinct definitions, although the amount of cycle stock can be dependent on lot sizes. (7-6), which of the following situations is an example of inventory being held as a way to balance supply and demand? A manufacturer holds inventory of key components to maintain a level production schedule. That has probably more to do with production scheduling and leveling. B, a manufacturer of seasonal products builds finished goods inventory before the peak selling period. I like that answer. A distributor maintains safety stock of slow-moving items as a central distribution center. And D, a retailer stocks a variety of sizes and colors of fast-moving items to avoid losing sales. Well, 7-6, the best answer is a manufacturer of seasonal products builds finished goods inventory based before the peak selling period. Answer A refers more to a buffer. Answer C is more of a general inventory management strategy, and D would be considered more of a safety stock. 50-70, a grocery store wants to keep a small stash of diapers on hand beyond what they predict they will sell for the upcoming season. What is this small stash known as? Well, best answer is safety stock. The others, material stockpile, emergency stash, or product differential are not things discussed in any body of knowledge. 36-11, inventory that depletes gradually as customer orders are fulfilled and is replenished cyclically when supplier orders are received is known as cycle stock, pipeline stock, safety stock, or anticipation. Best answer is cycle stock. That's pretty much the definition of cycle stock. 36-2, this inventory function is used when a company can foresee the need to build inventory to support expected increases in demand or disruptions in supply. Cycle stock, pipeline stock, safety stock, or anticipation. Best answer is anticipation. A good example is customers importing product from Asia as they order inventory in advance of the Chinese New Year, which is typically happens at the start of every year. It's a 1-month shutdown. Or increasing ordering production in advance of a planned shutdown, as we talked about in the example provided earlier. 70-12, which of the following is a reason an organization may purchase hedge inventory? To capitalize on quantity discounts? Maybe. To lock in low market prices? I like the reference to prices. To protect against surge demand? To claim extended supplier warranties? Well, the best answer here, because hedging has to do with financial transactions, is to lock in low market prices. 70-40, the theory of constraints describes its scheduling system as drum, buffer, rope. What does buffer refer to? Well, while we did not specifically go through theory of constraints in this session, you may be able to draw your own conclusions. So best answers, the production pulled to the constraint for processing, the pace of production, the time that the inventory protects constraints, or D, the process of inventory improving the operation performance. Best answer is C, the time that inventory protects against constraints. The drum of the TOC drum buffer rope scheduling system refers to the pace of production, or the drum beat of production. The rope of the TOC drum buffer rope scheduling system refers to the production pulled to the constraint for processing. 2 more. Why does safety stock exist? To allow for transportation time? Not so much. To provide against the uncertainties of supply and demand? Probably so. To allow less expensive purchases by buying more? Nope. To reduce inventory expenses? No. Best answer, to provide protection against uncertainties of supply and demand. And a more strategic question, 60-523. A company purchases strategic raw materials from a region that is surrounded by political unrest. So there's some uncertainty. A decision is made to purchase 6 months supply of its material based on speculation that the unrest may shut down transportation routes for this material. Which of the following best describes this inventory? Hedge, anticipation, transportation, or fluctuation? Best answer is hedge inventory. As you can see there, I circled speculation, and that pretty much outlines the definition of what's happening there. This information is brought to you by the Supply Chain Doctor, host of Supply Chain is Boring on the Supply Chain Now network. Check out supplychainnow.com for more information to help you become a better supply chain professional.